Comic Hour with your hosts, Andrew Glonner
and Chris Ramos.
Tonight, we cover She-Hulk by John Byrne. And you may ask, why are we covering She-Hulk by John Byrne? Well, there is a TV series that's getting picked up, She-Hulk. It's coming out very soon, in a couple weeks. And we wanted to talk about who She-Hulk is, kind of give a brief explainer, cover one of our favorite runs. But this run's not so much what's going to be covered in the show. It's going to be influenced by it. But this was one of my personal runs that I kind of read during, I think it was about a year ago. I read this and I went, wow, this is such a unique book. And I basically read it in a day. And I was like, I really gravitated towards the story, the voice, what they said about her. And I thought I would share that with our audience today. And is this your first time reading the material, Chris?
Yeah, I mean, some of the She-Hulk ones, which are collected in here, they started off with kind of like the way that She-Hulk originally started sort of stepping into the Marvel universe, which was in 1985. And she didn't get her own series until about 4 years later in 1989.
Yeah.
So this one was, I've seen the covers. I think I maybe have read a couple of these here and there through the years, but nothing like this where, again, that's where I like the omnibus. They collect the whole run. So you can say, oh, cool. Like I kind of missed out on this when I was a kid of like picking up here or my friend had one and I read it or whatever. But She-Hulk wasn't one of those that I like regularly followed.
Sure. And I could see that as being kind of just the way he does covers in the art. It may seem to turn off people or give a misconception of what the story is trying to tell, I suppose, or just it's a revealing cover or a revealing lead woman just for the sake of being that. But there's so much more in depth that the story goes into.
Well, yeah, and you always wonder what kind of stories behind the scenes go on about like editors or even artists saying, "Hey, I want to feature this character," or "Hey, I want to like put a female lead right on the cover of the comic, just front and center, nothing behind her, no background,
Right?
And just see how that sells." And trying to think of it as like not necessarily a marketing ploy,
right?
Because she was already gaining a little bit of her own following.
A little bit,
yeah.
Like Stan Lee, he wrote the first issue. Her first appearance is in the Savage She-Hulk #1, February 1980, with Stan Lee and John Mishima, and like that was such a great art style to start out with, kind of develop the character for a little bit. That's already come out in an omnibus, and we do encourage to check that out. But it didn't really start to grow in its own and She-Hulk developing her own voice until John Byrne decided to take on that role and start writing and drawing her.
Yeah, and you can tell even as I want to say correct as the omnibus is, it takes John Byrne's first story of She-Hulk, which was in the Marvel graphic novel series.
Yeah.
Marvel used to have, they didn't have like trade paperbacks, they didn't have omnibus, they didn't have collected editions or digital copies, obviously.
Not starting out.
In the 80s. So what they did was they made the Marvel graphic novel series. And what that was it gave artists and writers longer story runs. So instead of saying, hey, you have 15 pages in this comic, it was like you got 50 pages to tell a story. And they charged a little bit more, but it was also like a really big jump away from Marvel mainstream. So they didn't have to worry about like, is this crossing over with some other story?
Yeah, they could kind of play with the continuity a bit.
Yeah, and they could just like tell their own run. So John Byrne did that. She-Hulk had her own run with the Marvel graphic novel in 1985.
Yeah.
And that's the very first one up in this Omni, is just to say, hey, this is She-Hulk.
This is how he envisioned her. And this was kind of like his pitch to the readers and everything. And to Marvel is like, this is what I want to do for She-Hulk if I'm going to go on and continue to do this.
Yeah, and he wrote it also, written and penciled by John Byrne. So he was also showing them, hey, I can write this comic too. For some reason, he just really latched on to her. He was the one who jumped her into the Fantastic Four at the time.
Yep.
And he just wanted to make sure that character was becoming a strong female lead. But John Byrne was always really interested in working on the female leads and making sure they had their time in the spotlight too.
Absolutely. And this was also a time where John Byrne was doing several series. He is known for his, as you described, Chris, when we were talking, like just his fast style, but it's really effective and concise. Like he's known for his like X-Men artistry, and he's did the Fantastic Four runs, Avengers. There's not a lot of properties John Byrne hasn't done.
No, and he's still running strong.
He's yeah, and
um,
he's still around to this day. Yeah, I don't think he's super active anymore, but he's still with us, and it's really cool to continue to talk about his stories and whatnot. So.
I mean, his strongest, most popular run is probably X-Men.
Yeah,
Um,
I would say
by
so.
far,
Because he took over
Days
for
of Future Past. And things
yeah,
like
because
that
he
is
took
his
over
thing.
for Dave Cockrum when he left.
Yes, and then he moved into doing Fantastic Four, and then he moved into doing She-Hulk, and then he moved back into doing like Superman. I mean, he
His
has been
Superman run
jumping
is
all
really
over.
good. Well,
Yeah.
that just came out in collected editions.
Yes, so
that's
he
been
is
one of the Superman
definitely
runs.
a fan favorite. But within the wheelhouse of the working industry, like Andrew said, he was just known as a fast artist. And when you're in comics, if you could pump out 4 pages instead of 2, you were sought after.
And he has a
moving.
really good voice, and
Yeah.
he does both the writes and draws,
Yeah.
which is
Yeah.
a rare combo. Not a lot of those people are around.
Well, and some of his costume designs and just some of the ways that he drew certain characters, they still kept that up for a very long time.
Yeah,
Even with other artists, they said this is sort of the layout.
yeah.
A lot of people don't know, but even in Marvel and DC, they would have entire books of characters and for the writers and artists.
Oh,
And they
sure,
would
like the
say-
history of the Marvel universe and things like that. Yeah,
Yeah, and they would say, here is the Invisible Woman. This is her current outfit. This is her current hairstyle. This is how tall she is. If you drew her next to someone else, this is how tall they are. So it's sort of like a cheat sheet, like a recipe book for artists. And John Byrne helped develop a lot of those styles.
And the more we're talking about it, I was watching some recent interviews with John Byrne, and I guess it was Mark Grimwald that was like, "Hey, you should try out the She-Hulk book. I think you would have a really good voice for it. You just introduced her in the Fantastic Four. I think it's time to get her into like a solo series." And,
He's like, okay, let's try this
yeah,
out.
all right, yeah, let's try it. And he hadn't had a lot of opportunity to flex his like comedy muscles or anything, so it was a really good opportunity for him to show what that is.
And what he can do.
Yeah. So, yeah, I guess going back, like, what was your first impressions of this book?
So
This omnibus, I should say.
I just with everything, every other omnibus or any other collected edition, the first 2 or 3 issues are usually trying to set the stage a little bit. And I don't think there's many comic book characters that continued on how they originally started.
Absolutely.
So for She-Hulk, I think what they wanted to do was just to say she's part of the Hulk family.
Yeah.
And they just really kept connecting her to the Incredible Hulk.
Yes.
Bruce Banner
Yeah, I guess.
is her cousin.
Yes. So, for those that don't know, or you're going to go watch the show, Jennifer Walters is the cousin of She-Hulk, like Chris said, but she gets the Hulk powers from a blood transfusion.
Yeah.
Because she got into like a medical emergency or an accident or something, and the only way to bring her back is with a blood transfusion. And who's the closest blood relative to her? Bruce Banner.
Bruce Banner, who
is
is also
also
the
the Hulk. Dun dun dun. The only thing that is incredibly different about the two of them, though, is that She-Hulk retains her consciousness. It might be a little enhanced, and she builds up more confidence, gets taller, but she has all the strength of the Hulk. She does have the ability, the more angry she gets, the stronger she does. But most of the time, she keeps it in check, and she keeps a level head. And later on, after this run, she would become the Attorney at Law, which is covered in a whole nother run. That's what the show is based on.
Yeah, the Disney Plus show is based more on her being a lawyer.
Yes, this is more about palling around, being adventures, and really investing in the character of She-Hulk and developing who she is.
Yeah, and even at the very beginning, this Omni opens up that she's part of the Fantastic Four. So it's
Yeah, she's
not
just
that
coming
you
off of
need,
that.
yeah, you don't really need to read that or
Yeah.
know the background, but they're just trying to say like, all right, this is her. And if you think about the mid '80s,
Yeah.
at that time there were only a handful of female leads that had their own book.
Yeah.
Um, they always had them as strong female characters, like
Right.
dark, like Phoenix, or
Mm-hmm.
even Invisible Woman, or
Yep.
you start thinking about any other characters in like DC, like Wonder Woman and stuff.
Yeah. Supergirl.
Yeah, they've always had like strong female characters, but um, it was still a time when they weren't ready to give everyone their own series.
Sure.
So
Always living in the shadow of the predominant character, I guess.
yeah, and this was like exactly what that is. It's an offshoot from the Incredible Hulk, and you can find some stories online that we were even looking up of like the TV show, the Incredible Hulk TV
Yeah.
show
Yep. With Lou
with Lou
Ferrigno.
Ferrigno was super popular at the time, and they were just competing with what's the next biggest
Yeah.
show. So they were
Yep.
like, "What's the next character we can do, or how can we change this around?" And what was it, the
The
Bionic Man?
Bionic Woman, yep, because like the $6 million man was coming out, and they're like, "Oh, we need to capitalize on this," so they did the Bionic Woman, and then Marvel's like, "Oh my god, we gotta get ahead of this."
We need a female now. So She-Hulk was born as
Yes,
a side effect of just a marketing ploy, but then John Byrne
found the voice for her.
found the voice for her. Yeah.
Absolutely. So yeah, it's really cool, Brian, just to explore how she thinks about things in the Marvel universe, how she acts and interacts with all the different characters, and developing a love interest, I guess, with a man wolf, I believe it
Yeah.
was.
And
Yeah.
Hercules.
Yeah. Well, what was it? Yeah, Hercules a little bit. Yeah. Yeah. But Jonah Jameson's son.
Oh,
Yeah. Or yeah. So that was really cool to like see that happen, and just kind of figure out what's going on, because she's not a damsel in distress at all during this book.
no.
Very seldomly, like, she needs help, but she's one that's mostly saving the day from other people.
So they kind of really emphasize her strength. And
Yes.
that's something that they wanted to, I think, to just lay the foundation right away. Like
Yeah.
she is super strong. She's
Yep.
really, really competent. But she's also, like you said, when the Hulk first transformed, he was sort of a lumbering, slow monster.
Yes.
And I think they wanted to purposely set this up as she's still a very powerfully spoken woman.
Mhm.
So even though she's now super strong, she still has that like playful atmosphere to her. And I think they really played on like um her physique
Yeah.
is also like emphasized and strengthened to, I guess, like peak human performance a little bit.
Yes.
So
Absolutely.
they would
She
look
wasn't
at it.
like stronger than the Hulk, but she was at
But
peak human
yes,
performance.
yeah, for a female. So then of
Yes.
course she's like the perfect weightlifter strength
Yeah.
7 foot form, and
But could hold her own.
yeah, so she started playing on that. So I think I wonder that they joke that it helped with book sales. Um, and I wonder if it did, because almost every single cover is her talking to the audience. So now we can at
Yes.
least
And that's a
approach
great
that a little bit.
Yep,
Yeah.
and that's a great segue. So, She-Hulk is at least one of the first early on characters in Marvel and comics to break the fourth wall. How would you describe the fourth wall, Chris?
So I I want to just touch a little bit on covers first. So
Yep,
usually,
That's good. Yeah.
usually when you look at the cover of a comic, there's either like a fictitious scene set up where a villain is like dangling a hero over a cliff or something, and you're like, well, that's kind of interesting. It looks like he's losing. And then when you read the comic, that never happened. It was just like
Yeah.
cover.
Yeah. And the scene never really came up,
Yeah.
or it'd be a different angle or a different perspective.
Yeah, it's like
on
being a trailer for a movie, and then
Yes.
when you watch the movie, like that never really happened.
No.
Uh,
It just looks cool.
So that's one way to do a cover. The other way to do a cover is to just have some sort of action scene of just all your heroes fighting, right?
Yeah.
Like you're like, that's cool.
A
There's like
collage.
a lot
Yeah.
of energy in here.
Mhm.
So She-Hulk was always looking right at you off the cover, and she was always talking about
Yeah.
like, isn't this funny? Or look at the predicament I'm in now, or you should buy this comic.
Mhm.
So people started picking up right away that the fourth wall was, yeah, even her very first issue
Yep.
was literally her holding a comic, her comic,
Yes. Her own, like her first appearance
her
of, yep,
from Marvel Comics
Stanley,
Group. Yeah. So that was her first issue. And so on this new series, which is the Sensational She-Hulk,
Mm-hmm.
she's holding that and she says, okay, now this is your second chance. If you didn't buy my book this time, I'm going to come to your house and rip up all your X-Men.
Yeah.
So everyone was like, what the heck?
Yeah,
Like,
right. A
she's-
fictitious character is
Yep.
going to come to your house.
but
and
she's
rip up your
looking
X-Men.
right at you as the audience.
Yes.
John Byrne, who used to do the X-Men, of course, throws in his little X-Men plug.
Right.
And it was like, buy this book. And it was just really funny because at the time it was like no character was staring at you off the cover and saying, buy this book.
Right.
So yeah, so the fourth wall is the wall between us, the reader, and them, the comic book world. So like the fourth wall, we were just saying, if you're on a stage or if you're in a movie, the wall behind you and then the two walls on the side are the three walls, and then the fourth wall is the one of the performance. You're connecting with the audience, and the audience is watching everything happen through the fourth wall.
Yes.
And usually you kind of get to that, like, don't look at the camera,
Mm-hmm.
don't look off the stage, don't make eye contact with the viewers because you're going to ruin that
the world,
that suspension of disbelief,
Right.
But She-Hulk, I don't know. John Byrne just
They said,
let's do
well, we're
it.
going to do the exact opposite. That we're going to lean into it.
Yeah. Yeah. And like almost every 5 pages or so, she's making some sort of comment to the reader.
Right. Or even John Byrne himself will communicate with She-Hulk or
Yes.
write himself in the book,
Yeah.
or make comments back and forth fighting with the editors and things like that and the artists and stuff. But he is the artist. So
Well, and isn't there one time, like, so on the cover, she's always in like a swimsuit,
Yep.
or she's always in some sort of, I don't know, scantily clad
Yeah.
sort of problem thing. And one issue, she was like wearing a sweater or something,
Right.
and she was like, "What are you doing? Don't you think, or don't you know that this comic doesn't sell with just the story?"
Right.
So this kind of makes fun about it. So she's always
that's so
doing
much
that.
fun. Yeah. Right. There's even like editorial notes. Not bad. But I could have used a few more toad ships or Tom. Well, we'll take a good look at the ones you got, boss. I'm not drawing this fleet again. But John, if you don't do, I quit, Bob. So
Yeah.
it'll be like right in the middle of the thing. And you're like, what?
and it's really, really funny because she uses it as a way to like guide the story.
Yeah,
So like
she's almost like another narrator.
Yeah,
can be.
yeah.
Yeah.
so like when you're reading it, it's almost like after a while it becomes like something you look forward to. Like, how is she going to do this time?
Right. It has such a unique way because you don't read that style all the time, and it's just refreshing to see. And it's like, oh, okay, what's happening? And throughout this whole run, he keeps that continuity and this really good pacing and voice just all throughout this run. And it's very consistent, and it makes you laugh. Like, I don't laugh a lot when I'm reading my comics, but I always enjoy it when I do. And I'm like, I see what you're doing there. Okay.
Well, in like some pages, she's actually literally ripping the page.
Yeah.
Or like, poking her head around the corner of a blank page.
Yeah.
And she'd be like, what's going on? You didn't know what to draw on this page? And it's just a blank page with her just standing there.
Or she'll go, more Toadmen, burn.
Yeah.
God dang it.
She'll like yell at him.
Yeah.
So, the big idea too is that we are reading this comic in preparation or just in in connection with the Disney Plus show that's coming out. And we've seen the first trailer. It's already exciting to know that she,
There's a wink and a nod towards
yeah,
it.
that she is going to be breaking the fourth wall in some capacity. A lot of people know Deadpool breaks the fourth wall all the time.
Sure.
He came
Yep.
out a few years after this.
Mm-hmm.
So she was the original. But in the show, when the first teaser came out,
Yep.
she wasn't breaking the fourth wall, and then everyone was like, "What's going on?"
Right. Yeah.
How could you have this show without having her
Break the fourth wall, and then you'll see a little bit more of it. You're like, okay, she's winking and nodding at you.
Yeah.
Okay, it's happening. And it's such a good feeling to just honor that the source material and Byrne and all the things and that he was able to accomplish with this book and all that.
Yeah, I mean, that's the point of taking a story, turning it into a TV show. You still have to kind of acknowledge where that story came from.
Absolutely. And I think even in Dan Slott's run that kind of the show is based on, he was still influenced by this run. I mean, it's a pretty seminal story for her that he spent so much time. I think, I don't know, the run went on for quite a while.
Yeah, so in this omnibus,
I think there's at least 30.
There's about 750 pages or so,
right.
725. And it starts out, her run, Sensational She-Hulk #1, came out in May of 89.
Mm-hmm.
And John Byrne ended his run in 93.
Yeah.
But, I believe her
3 years, yeah.
I believe her series continued on. I don't think it was called Sensational She-Hulk. That may have ended with Byrne.
Yeah.
And then it moved on to some of her other storylines. And she was always a really good character to jump into other groups and other team ups. Yeah. They always are like, oh, geez, I want She-Hulk,
Right. Yeah. I think she did a little bit with like X Factor, and like Peter David had a big run on her. That was the latest She-Hulk omnibus to come out where she's like a bounty hunter. And
she's
like
the tank.
Yeah. She's the tank.
Throw her up front. She's the tank.
Right. But I love this run. It's such a good story. It gets wacky at times. Like she goes into space with like this space trucker, and you're like, what's happening right now? But it's just a lot of adventuring and just interacting with different characters that you would never expect. And it just really having a lot of fun with it. And that's what comics are about sometimes. You don't have to be super serious all the time, but you still want to do cool things.
Yeah. Well, and I think it's also important to note that she is always She-Hulk.
Yes. Yeah. She doesn't like being back into her own normal self.
Yeah. So she doesn't have to be angry.
Yes.
Or there's no like big catalyst. She took another transfusion and said it's permanent. And of course, there's always storylines where she's not. Yeah. But for the most part, I mean, 99% of the time, she is She-Hulk all the time. And so she really, sometimes they play on the story of like her sticking out. Mm-hmm. Obviously she can't walk down a New York street without like being 7 feet tall and green.
Right.
So they do play on that a little bit. They do play on like, her just accepting her role in the whole Marvel universe.
Yeah. She's always trying to figure out where she fits in.
Yeah. Yeah. Like
it took a while for her to find that, but it's kind of part of following her hero's journey.
Well, and I think if she was written nowadays, and that's what we're all kind of waiting to see with the TV show is, are they going to play on those themes of sticking out in a crowd and, the themes of not of being mutated. I mean, she's been changed.
Right.
She was born a human and she's been changed. So how is that going to affect just her life?
Yeah. It seemed like they're still kind of playing on some of the themes from like when I watched her, like in the Fantastic Four cartoons or in the Incredible Hulk cartoon where he's a mentor to her still.
Right.
Trying to guide her through the ropes. There is that whole montage in the trailer. And I'm like, okay, that's cool. But the thing is, it was Professor Hulk that was teaching her versus just regular Hulk.
Yeah, right.
Which is fine, I guess. But I kind of miss the Savage Hulk and doing such things.
Yeah.
Maybe someday we'll get back to it.
Well, maybe they're kind of prepping her to be the logical Hulk, and then he's going to start
maybe
devolving
transition
or
out.
something.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
we'll see how that kind of plays out, but that also is why she's been put in a role of like a strong female
Yeah.
lawyer.
Very
And
empowered
yeah,
and things like that. Taking
she's an
that role.
attorney. She has an actual education. She's very smart about what she does, and of course, they hire her to be an attorney for
Yeah.
superheroes
Right.
because they're like,
Yeah.
well,
And that's why it was such a cool moment. If people have kind of figured it out that Daredevil's going to make an appearance in the show, and it's like, oh my God, they're coming together.
I mean, they would know who each other is, but
Yeah.
he's not ever going to say he's a superhero, but
No.
she just can't get around it.
Yes.
I mean, she
They're
obviously is.
they're gonna collide, and it's gonna be great. I'm gonna enjoy it. I'm gonna fan out.
Another part of the book that I bookmarked was towards the end.
Yeah.
Well, not towards, maybe 75% of the way through. uh, She-Hulk kind of goes back and forth with the pages and the costumes and like what her background is, and then she's like grabbing on the cover. She like has no clothes, so she grabs the comics code and covers herself
Yeah.
with. She like tears off the comics code, which
Right.
again, the comics code is there to make sure there is no nudity. So then she like
Yeah.
uses it as a towel, which is really funny.
Yeah. And then
Uh,
she has this whole dialogue with probably Byrne or the editor. I think it's the editor.
Yeah, she
actually.
says, "Sorry, I know you're the editor of my book and all, but if I stop moving here, then it's going to show what will be bigger trouble with the comics code than we already
Yeah.
are."
And just having that conversation in the comic.
Yeah. So then while she's trying to like cover herself by jumping rope really fast, so it's like making a blur, so you can't see that she has no
Exactly.
clothes on.
And it's almost very meta.
Yeah.
And we haven't really did a lot of meta comics, but like this is a great example of when it gets like you're talking to the audience, or you're breaking that fourth wall. You're making it meta textual, I guess. I don't know. Yeah.
Yeah. So the editor tears the jump rope away and says, Tom DeFalco wouldn't ever have allowed this in the first place if you weren't actually wearing something behind those blurred lines. So then when she grabs the jump rope away, it looks
Right.
all of a sudden she's wearing like a swimsuit. So you're like, oh geez, so
Right.
it is kind of funny that she always talks about the Legion of Decency, like she's gonna get like a code violation or something.
Right.
So they have fun with it.
Yeah, and it's nothing degrading. It's nothing like that. And maybe if you think that's your opinion, but I think it was really trying to play around with what they can get away with and what they can say about what was going on at the time, and while trying to make her a lead character and experimenting what a female lead is.
Well, I mean, I think they were just purposefully putting that out all the time so that people would, number one, they're not trying to hide that she's a female.
Yep.
And they're not trying to hide that she has a very good physique, for
Mhm.
comics. And that's like,
Yep.
most of the time, all the comic book females were,
Exactly. Exploiting that.
Yeah. Written as like a great gymnast or something like that.
Yeah.
But at the same moment, it was like, hey, here's some fun to sort of bring light to this so that you don't think we're just trying to um, kind of like over sexualize She-Hulk.
Exactly.
So here's some fun, like, all right, everyone, look, she's being goofy and
Yeah.
she gets her hair done and
But
she
then
does those.
but then John Byrne's like, all right, I'm gonna do it my way.
Yep. And then he turns it around where she's fighting aliens in space and, taking on real comic book themes. So
Yeah.
it is funny that they're just right off the bat, like, yes, okay, we know what we're drawing. And then
Right.
on the same
And she still
token-
fights strong villains.
Right.
She still fights Thundra. She still fights Xanadu. She still fights. I think she runs into the leader at some points, maybe not on this run, but other sides. She's still fighting like space villains.
she's out with like Guardians of the Galaxy and fighting scrolls and stuff.
Yeah,
So,
and
she's doing
X-Men villains, things like that. So she's still honing her own.
Yeah, definitely. And they want you to read the comic. So, to get you through the first few pages of just silliness,
Yeah.
cool. Then you're into the comic for the rest of the
Yeah.
run.
It was a classic Marvel run. It was very experimental, I think, at the time. Not a lot of other people were doing it, but I think it was John Byrne did a good like trailblazing run to set the tone for the character and what is possible. for this character, or what is possible for these themes going forward.
Yes.
So, She-Hulk, the Disney Plus show comes out on August 8th, or not August 8th, August 18th. We really encourage you to check out the show, read this book, figure out, we try to explain who She-Hulk is and one of our favorite runs, and just kind of identify what some of her strengths were and what we liked about the character.
Yeah, and the overall takeaway I think would be, if you see a show coming up, or if you see a character introduced in a movie, or you see some other comic that's got a brand new run, we are really pushing everyone to find the backstory, find out what that character's origin is and where they started and why. And that'll lead you down a really good path to say, oh, wow, so she started with John Byrne. So who's John Byrne? And just kind of keep
Right.
going. And you really start seeing a big connection with the comic book world. And that introduction happened from one character that you liked and you wanted to learn more about, now turned into 10 characters that you like and you want to learn more about. And that's the whole point.
Yes, absolutely. And this omnibus, it's a little hard to find these days, but I think they'll start reprinting this eventually, and it'll get around. You can still read some of the stories on Hoopla and trade paperbacks and things like that. So we really encourage you to go read it however you can. But we love this omnibus. This is a really good collected edition.
And how?
Yeah. And that's been another exciting episode of Bam Pow Comic Hour. This is Andrew Glonner.
And Chris Ramos.
Signing off.